Tonight, a sacking surprise for the New Zealander, widely regarded as the world's best sailor. Mothballed and costing us millions, now these Air Force planes could be sold as scrap. A hefty penalty for the Australian horse doper with New Zealand links. And they were much loved, playful pets, so why did they end up in the freezer? Kia ora, good evening. The man who won the America's Cup for New Zealand and then defected to Alinghi is distraught tonight after being suddenly dumped by the Swiss team. Skipper Russell Coutts has been sacked for repeatedly violating his duties. And a rule change seems to stop him joining another team to contest the next Cup regatta.
This was the final straw for Ernesto Bertarelli. Russell Coutts in a chase boat instead of behind the wheel for Alinghi.
I asked him before we left the dock, I asked him again while he was on the chase, and he decided that he didn't want a helm.
Despite that clear warning, the world's best sailor, currently match racing in Portugal, is still shocked by the news he's been dumped.
I've got to say I was a bit surprised with the decision. I got a brief phone call from Ernesto Bertarelli's lawyer, or one of his lawyers, this evening, followed immediately by a media release.
Russell Coutts hasn't helmed for Alinghi since winning the Cup in March last year. It's a key reason cited by Bertarelli for dumping Coutts, saying his refusal to sail with the team at this regatta in Newport last month, along with regattas in Sweden and Italy, meant Coutts wasn't fulfilling his duties.
The reasons they've been given by Alinghi are that Russell has been in violation of his employment contract.
Coutts refused to helm to keep his options open, believing under the Cup protocol he could join another syndicate. But in a classic piece of Cup manoeuvring, Alinghi last week changed the rules, preventing him from boarding another team at the next America's Cup in 2007.
I don't like any retroactive legislation of anything, anywhere, any time, in any walk of life. So I don't like it and don't agree with it, but it's quite obvious that they've done it as the Coutts clause.
The old rule stated after January 2006, a competitor shall not engage any person in any capacity who has sailed on another competitor's yacht. That now reads, from March 2nd this year, a person contracted, employed, paid or otherwise engaged by a competitor may not be engaged by another competitor.
Even though it appears to be aimed at me, I think it will affect a lot of other people.
It's a huge blow for the man who led Team New Zealand to Cup glory in '95, then repeated the feat in 2000, before completing the hat-trick with Alinghi last year to become the most successful Cup skipper ever. Now he's been cut adrift.
It's true that I would have very much liked to have sailed in the next America's Cup, and I think this current rule change seems to preclude any chance that I've got of that.
Russell Coutts might use his newfound free time to further his ideas for a regatta to rival the Cup. Brian Seymour, One News.
Our yachting correspondent Martin Tasker joins me now. Martin, Coutts refused to sail for Alinghi. How come he's so surprised at being dropped?
I don't think it's so much the surprise at being dropped, it's the speed with which, A, he's been dropped because they were apparently in negotiations last week, but also it's the speed with which he's been prevented from going elsewhere. Now, he was using the not sailing as a bargaining chip, presumably to get some kind of better deal, to maybe get some of the things he wanted. But all of a sudden, very, very quickly, that's out of the question and he's on the beach in 2007.
Now, how did they manage to change these rules so quickly?
Well, you can surmise. I mean, I would imagine, for example, maybe that Ernesto Bertarelli's got sick of the fact that Coutts is playing these games. So he rings up his mate Larry Ellison and says, you know, I want him to go, and I need your help. Now, it's Ellison and it's Coutts who have to do this thing with the protocol. So he says, I'll change the protocol and sideline him, will you help? Well, Ellison's not going to say no, is he? Because he's got a far better chance of winning the Cup if Coutts isn't there, so the deal is done. And it's a classic case of the golden rule. The men who have the gold make the rule.
And what happens to Coutts then?
Well, they always talk about going on what used to be gardening leave or time with the family. For him, it'll be a lot more golf, but he'll be getting back into sailing. When I spoke to him today, he was sure that he wants to stay in sailing. There's things like the Volvo Ocean Race, there's match racing that he is already involved in. So he'll be kept busy in yachting. He wants to contribute to sailing, but at the same time, he'll really miss the Cup.
We shouldn't be surprised by all this, should we, Martin? It reads like a Shakespearean tragedy, doesn't it?
Or, as somebody suggested to me today, Lord of the Rings. I mean, these people, they sort of search the Cup, they get hold of the Cup, and then they get hold of it, and they have some kind of little higher moral purpose, some higher ground that they're going to take it to, but then it gets hold of them, and it becomes their precious, and every episode seems to produce a new Gollum.
Very apt. Thank you, Martin. Yachting correspondent Martin Tasker. In other news tonight, the Air Force's fleet of mothballed jet fighters are in danger of being sold as scrap metal. The Skyhawks and Air Mackie trainers have been on the market since the government axed the Air Combat Wing at the end of 2001, but there have been no takers.
These fighter jets were put up for sale nearly 3 years ago, but a buyer hasn't been found. Now, Cabinet papers reveal a worst-case scenario would be to sell the planes as scrap metal.
Those men and women that have served in the Air Force over a long period of time in New Zealand would be utterly disgusted to discover that one of the options the government had considered since the summer of 2002 was selling these aircraft for scrap.
Keeping the Skyhawk and Air Mackie fleets in a state fit for sale isn't cheap. The 34 planes cost $350,000 each month to store and maintain. So far, that's cost $8 million. The government's still confident of finding a buyer. The Defence Minister says it's unlikely they'll be sold for scrap, and he denies that making that option public will hurt the sale price.
It does indicate to the marketplace that it is an option, but the reality is we want to sell the planes for the best return we can get, best return to the taxpayers. That's why the project's being managed professionally. It's why I can't make any detailed comment about those negotiations.
Every time we question the government on this issue, they say a sale is imminent. Well, what's clear from these documents is it's not.
The documents also reveal that a sale was almost clinched 2 years ago. Potential buyers include the Malaysian government and a US pilot training school. But so far nothing's been signed, and the planes remain in storage at increasing cost to the government, both economically and politically. Guyon Espiner, One News.
Harness racing officials across the Tasman are cracking down on drug cheats, handing out their toughest penalty ever. On the receiving end is a Melbourne trainer who's admitted doping horses with Blue Magic. And authorities say his supplier was a Christchurch man found dead at his home last week.
They call it Blue Magic, a performance-enhancing substance containing propantholine. It's designed to give horses a winning edge and a legal one. But for trainers like Rod Waitman, the spell's worn off. A friend and associate of Christchurch man Rob Asquith, believed to be the mastermind behind Blue Magic, Waitman has been caught.
Rod Waitman isn't a big name on the Australian harness racing scene, but here in Victoria, he was ranked number 10 as a trainer last season with 69 starts and 30 wins. But of course now, all those results are being questioned, and Rod Waitman's making a name for himself for all the wrong reasons.
Waitman admitted giving horses Blue Magic on 7 occasions. His penalty, 9 months disqualification for each time, 63 months in total. But Waitman didn't seem to care.
Hardly the end of the world. 5 years is a fairly long time. I think, perhaps half that term would have been, reasonable to expect.
When Waitman's property was raided back in April, he had 60 test tubes of Blue Magic. He won't say if he was on selling it or if Rob Asquith was his supplier.
People can think, I guess, what they like, but as I say, I'm not going to, drag Rob's name and family through the mud.
But after questioning Waitman, officials were in no doubt.
We're satisfied that Mr Asquith, according to Mr Waitman anyway, there was certainly the connection between the two of them and their involvement with the Blue Magic.
So he was the main supplier here in Victoria?
It appears that way.
Waitman now has to repay around $40,000 in prize money. So why did you use it then?
Anything. It's the edge. Everyone wants an edge.
Officials are hoping the penalty dished out will be a deterrent.
I'd like to think so. I don't know where we'll go if it's not.
More details about Rob Asquith's operation are likely to emerge this week when 3 other trainers caught using Blue Magic have their cases heard. Vicky Wilkinson-Baker, One News, Melbourne.
The effects of the lead-contaminated corn flour scare are spreading tonight with the recall of another popular brand. Edmonds Fielder's corn flour has recalled some batches as news comes that the corn has also found its way to Fiji and Australia.
One of our most well-known baking ingredients caught up in the corn contamination scare. Testings revealed that Edmonds Fielder's corn flour has too much lead in it.
Certainly not something that we would find to be acceptable.
The latest products recalled are Edmonds Fielder's corn flour 300 grams, with best before dates of the 30th of September 2005 and the 1st of October 2005. Yesterday some Pam's and Gilmore's corn flour was recalled, and on the weekend Robinson's baby custard was pulled off shelves. Some of the products contain 100 times more lead than safe, but health authorities say it takes long-term exposure to do damage. The contaminated batches of corn came from China late last year and were milled into corn flour at Penfoods in Onehunga. The Food Safety Authority says this will be the final recall in New Zealand. It's given 26 other products the all clear.
I expect that they will be able to release those products, as they said, in the next day or so when they've done the checks.
It may be the last recall here, but the bad news is spreading overseas. 25 tonnes of the contaminated corn flour went to Fiji, 22 tonnes of it to Australia.
We've just coordinated a national recall of White Wings corn flour.
The contaminated corn was shipped to New Zealand on the bulk carrier Athena. The Food Safety Authority believes the lead got in either at sea or on the docks. One News understands that the Athena previously carried zinc and lead concentrate. Customs searched the ship while it was here, acting on a tip-off from overseas intelligence agencies that the crew had links to Al-Qaeda. But nothing was found. Customs is now tracking the ship's previous voyages and cargoes. Meanwhile, Edmonds says customers should return all affected corn flour and they'll get a refund. Chris Wright, One News.
And a few minutes ago, another batch of corn flour was recalled, this time in the lower North Island. Anyone with Pam's 400-gram maize corn flour, lots 3163 and 3153, with a best buy date of December 2005, should return it immediately for a refund. Coming up, the campaign preparing Britons against chemical or biological attack. A new downpour adds fresh uncertainty to an already saturated Bay of Plenty. And trouble with the law for a hip-hop megastar.
And later in sport, the Kiwi leading the war against drugs talks tough in the lead-up to Athens. We have the latest on another controversy at the Warriors, plus a bizarre love triangle the England coach and his boss has snapped. And we may have the V8 supercars, but the UK has big bangers of a different kind.